Welcome to Behind the Fence with Blake Thomas. Presented by Vinyl Fence Warehouse, the podcast where we talk to fence contractors about their journey in the fencing industry. So latch the gate and get ready, because we're about to dive deep into the world of fencing.
Hey everyone, I'm Blake at Vinyl Fence Warehouse, and this is the Behind the Fence podcast. Today on the interview here, we have Brody Barger with Frederick Fence out of Frederick, Maryland, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and he is in sales there at Frederick. Brody, how we doing today, man?
Really good. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. Glad to have you here. Did you make it into work all right this morning? I know you guys had some weather we were discussing.
This morning was fine. It got pushed back a few hours. I'm actually watching it accumulate on the ground right now. This area doesn't handle snow quite as well as some others, so a little bit goes a long way. And
now, I know up in the Northeast, especially this time, obviously you guys get a lot of weather. Do you guys offer any kind of, wintertime services like that, like a snow removal or anything like that right now?
we do not. This area, this mid-Atlantic kind of central non-eastern shore Maryland is a feast or famine with winter services like that.
Well, then let's start with the types of products and services that you guys do specialize in. So tell me what you guys do there at Frederick Fence.
Well, like the name says, we do fencing. We used to dabble in decking a little bit. That's been probably 15 or 20 years ago. Our original founder, Charlie, got out of that business. Fencing's what we're really good at, and we just tried to enhance what we're good at instead of trying to get better at something we weren't. There's really not much fence that we don't do. We specialize in some things a little better than others. Ag fence, high tensile, barbed wire is stuff we don't typically get into, and we do probably 20% of our total business on the commercial side. It's not something we're very big into. It's kind of a case-by-case basis, and it has to be in a good location for us with access. We just don't travel as well as what some of those other commercial entities are able to. So if it's something someone finds online now that's gotten really popular, it's not just Pinterest, but it's product like Urals. There's a ton of stuff advertised about every corner you go to. Once you start going down the Google search rabbit hole, there's not much that I can think of off the top of my head that we're not able to facilitate in at least some fashion for the customer.
Now, speaking of, you guys have done a little bit of our Goliath Multi Post system. How did you or your customers kind of come across that product? I know I had talked to you originally about some interest in the product, but what brought that on originally for you?
So our first job, another salesman was looking for another system that's, I don't want to say comparable, but it's along that same merch division or product group, slotted posts and
horizontal style.
Different types of inserts and things.
Uh-huh.
I'd actually dealt with that company he was looking at using and had a bad experience. And it just happened to be the day that your sample showed up here at the office.
Great, perfect timing.
It was perfect timing. So I went and got it, took it to him. Him and one of our owners sat down and looked at it. They were really impressed with the product. And I think it took a couple trips measuring and making sure we had the I's dotted and T's crossed. I think maybe they talked to you a couple times about some installation questions that we had and racking it with different grades. Because I don't know where most of your customers install at, but out here, a perfectly flat yard is a rarity.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely rare to get this stuff in a flat location. Let's see here. Now, what would probably be your company's main focus then?
So wood, I think, especially in, a couple of our markets that we're pretty heavy presence in, wood will always be the premier product. There's a few neighborhoods around here, some really strict HOAs that restrict us to very specific styles of wood fence. I mean, it's kind of crazy how against it some of these places are. I'd say wood is probably our biggest driver and will continue to be for the foreseeable future. But, the ornamental aluminum market has really opened up for us around here. We move a ton of that product. It's gotten really popular with pool installations, which over the last 4 years, when people were redoing their homes and making, the COVID oasis away from the rest of the world, those got really popular, and that helped expand that merch division. As far as your product goes, that division has really grown a lot over the last, I'd say, 2 years. We're really happy with the projects that we've done with you and how they've turned out. And a lot of it's the support that we get on the back end of it. There's always a variable or something that comes up, and we've been, a pretty good partnership with you for as new as the partnership is to be able to make that work. And when you can have that sort of resource to call and go over what you need and, you figure out what you can get to us to make that work, that's really helped grow that side of the business. I don't know that we ever planned to be installing a lot of this, but we've installed more than we anticipated to.
Well, good. We've really found, for us throughout the years to add, those more expensive high ticket items, to your arsenal of products. You really do hit that upper echelon of customer, and you start having those much higher ticket, jobs in the end. What typically, with a wood fence, may only be $10,000. You're looking at like 30 or so for, a mixed material thing.
Yes.
Obviously there's, good money in that, because, you
Yeah.
have an absolute premium product, you have a top-notch installation, and, in my professional opinion, always deserves, top dollar. So, with the newer styles of fencing coming in, they do tend to, kind of push some other, types of fences out, like you said, kind of some of the chain links and things like that. But for like your best seller there, like a wood fence, like what does that fence kind of look like with you guys? Like here in Oklahoma, it's typically, a 6-inch board, Western red cedar, dog ear top, with a Douglas fir runner, a couple different posts to choose from. Is it pretty well the same for you guys up there in Maryland, or are you guys doing anything special?
We do a lot of split rail and paddock or estate or crossbuck, depending on which side of the state you come from here.
Mhm.
For the, for privacy, yeah, that's pretty standard 6-inch wide board. We do a good bit of treated on our end. Cedars, I think a lot of that happened from the COVID rush when cedar went through the roof, that treated was easier to get to and a little bit better price point.
Yeah.
So I think that's where some of that came from, but, still really good mix of cedar and treated. For me, I sell, we're about an hour out of DC, an hour out of Baltimore, about an hour north of Arlington and Alexandria, a little over an hour, you get down into the Fairfaxes or Gainesville, Virginia. You see a lot of variety with that high of a footprint of travel, but pockets here or there only allow split rail, only allow, board on board, shadow box, wingate kind of stuff. But I'd say for the most part, split rail and paddock would be the top two drivers in the wood category.
Very cool, very cool. For those types of fences there, what is your kind of your typical per foot for like your best seller, per foot price?
Oh man.
Ballpark.
Split rail, with wire, tear out, 15 to 20 a foot.
And that's mostly, kind of for your bigger properties, acreages and things like that. Can you
Yeah, there's a couple residential developments, old residential developments in Montgomery County between us and DC that only allow split rail. And, some of those, the per foot looks a little bit because you have your labor minimums or your minimum day charges factored into it. Privacy, that can change a lot too, 25 to 50 a foot.
wow.
There's a few properties in downtown Frederick that have to have a very special style of fence that they're finally letting us transition out of just the old school stockade pre-built panel that was installed back in the 80s and 90s. And that stuff can reach up into the, the 60s to $70 a foot, depending on access and stuff can exceed that even a little bit more. When you start getting up into that 50, 60, $70 a foot range, that's where we've found our customers are really happy with getting some of those synthetic products like what we're talking about with you. Not necessarily, doubling the price, but then, comparing it to a split rail, it's obviously not in the same ballpark. But when you can show some value that it's, 1.5, 1 3/4 times more, and you never have to touch it again, that's really where we're seeing a good selling point with that product. And so far, with the limited work that we've done, that seems to be the type of customer that we're hitting. You can do this and have to replace it again in 20 or 30 years. You can do this and it's a forever fence, no matter, you're giving it to the kids, the grandkids, you're selling it, whatever you're doing, it's a forever item for you.
Now you guys are based in Frederick, Maryland, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you said that you also do some work in Virginia?
Yeah, we used to do Virginia a little bit more than we do now. We just got so busy there for a while. We had to kind of take care of our home area. All of our stuff that we travel, anything that's over an hour travel from the shop is case by case. It would be dependent on the job size, where it's located at, over restriction and on regulation from the local municipality, HOAs, places where we're licensed to work,
That's
all
what I
that
was
kind
kind
of
of
stuff.
asking. Do you guys have to, are y'all required any special licenses to, since you're based in Maryland, to have to go install anything in Virginia?
We're licensed in Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia.
Wow, that's impressive, man. Congratulations.
I mean, when you're located here,
You're
you
right.
almost have to be. Most fence companies, I believe, are. I don't think we're, a unicorn in that sense.
Okay. All righty. Well,
You
we
can
are,
drive any direction and be in
but
another state pretty quick.
slight culture shock here in Oklahoma. We're not required, to have any licenses.
Yes, sir.
Texas, I can go up to Kansas, I can go anywhere. Basically that's touching us, and we don't really have to have anything special like that. So it's always interesting to know, what local municipalities are requiring for everybody.
The
Like,
closer you get to the metro areas, the DC, the Baltimore, the more overregulation you run into. 2, 3, 4 permits required per job, conservation easements, equestrian easements, multiple utility easements, public improvement easement. I mean, you just run into all kinds of stuff the further you get to those areas. So Frederick itself is pretty good, and the further west in Maryland and West Virginia you go is pretty good. But it seems like the further east you go, the more trouble you get into with that sort of
more red
stuff.
tape, huh? Well, it's yeah, red tape is never fun. Like I said, here in Oklahoma, it's pretty relaxed. Like probably within the last 2 years, it's finally been enforced that, you at least have to have a permit. If
Yeah.
some it's just a $20 deal from, the local courthouse, but you still got to have it. But Oklahoma is a little bit behind the times when it comes to licensing.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
I hear that all the time, for fence companies that kind of end up, struggling a little bit, that it's such an easy way to enter the market, is to, get materials, from your local Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, get their, whatever picket they've got, whatever 2x4 they've got, whatever hardware, and, just to go throw a fence up. Is that a little bit harder to do in your area since, licensing is required?
So I thought so when I first joined this business and kind of got into it a little bit more than just my feet wet. But I honestly, here lately, it seems like there's a new fence company popping up every few weeks or every month. I think you're right with the nail on the head that it is an easy way to get into the market. And, some of the areas around here don't require permitting for fence like they would with a deck or with a patio or roofing or whatever. I also think it's easier to slide in and do a fence than it is, than tearing off a roof or doing a bunch of dirt work and excavating. You get a lot less eyes on it. We had a customer a couple weeks ago that asked me to look at a quote they'd gotten that I was significantly higher than, and I really shouldn't have been. And when I searched the company, I couldn't find any record of them. So, it's a, doing business as instance or just a couple guys in a truck with some homemade magnets or some instance going on. And I think someone would run into that everywhere, but maybe around here you run into it a little bit more often just because it is very tough to get your Maryland contractor's license. It is tough to get licensed in Virginia. It's tough to get licensed in DC. So when things are tough like that and people are trying to make their move, they can't always wait for the bureaucracy to clear up and then be able to get into it so that they maybe move forward without the right accreditation. And that's something they got to figure out on their own. Nothing we have an opinion on.
And now you said there's a total of 4 states that you guys are licensed in?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so with those 4 states that you operate in, let's give your company a little bit more of a scale. What is the annual revenue of the company, or maybe, number of jobs, per year that you guys are getting in?
So I truly don't know. We had our first sales meeting of the year in January, and we were looking at some numbers. And over the last few years, 12, 13, 1,400 jobs a year was pretty average. Probably, probably not going to quite see the peak from COVID unless something, lets absolutely loose. This weather so far this year has really hampered us starting out as strong as we did last year. But if we hit that 12, 1,300 sold unit mark, that's pretty comfortable for us. We'd be happy with that, I think.
And how many crews are you guys, operating with to put those types of numbers in?
I'm honestly not sure right now. Peak season will probably have 7 or 8 hourly crews and at least 3 subs, maybe 4 subs running.
Oh, wow.
That's actually probably where we're the unicorn in the area with the amount of hourly crews that we have. When I first joined the business, it just blew my mind the amount of tenure. You just walked around the office and found someone that had been with us, for 20 or 25 years. I don't know of any other company around here that has that many and that tenured on the hourly side. And that helps us with the specialty and custom stuff a good bit because we don't have to, hit certain thresholds for a sub crew to go out to, or, smaller jobs that take a lot more detail and time that the sub maybe wouldn't be interested in. We're able to take on because of that. And that's really been a boon in our hat for that, a feather in our hat for that type of product and that type of customer.
And you said that you guys do a lot of aluminum,
Yes,
obviously a
sir.
lot of wood fence, and you guys are vinyl fabricators. Where do you guys stand as far as dig or no dig? Are you guys still digging and setting like the rest of us, or are you
Yes,
guys
sir.
some of the no dig types?
We haven't done, at least to my knowledge, we haven't done any of the no dig yet. I'm sure you guys see it too. That's gotten a lot more popular lately. That's gotten a lot of traction online. West of us here is like one giant boulder, and you would never be able to do that there. There are a few areas we install that may be a product for the future, but not anything we've explored to any extent right now.
I've done quite a bit of research on it. Obviously we probably, see a lot of the same stuff, but it's definitely, I'm not here to sell it on, sell it to you. I'm with you. I don't think it's for everything. It definitely makes for an interesting conversation because it's so polarized. The guys that are on it, they love it. That's the only way to go. The guys that are still old school, we're still like, I mean, I'll just dig a hole,
Yeah.
that's just part of putting a fence up. But man, it just always makes for an interesting piece, to see, if people are doing that, get their take on it. And yeah, I always love an opinion on a no dig.
There's a lot of opinion on that stuff going around online. About every group I'm part of has a, at least bi-weekly, if not weekly conversation about that. So
It's not a conversation anymore. It's an argument.
yes, sir. Yes,
Uh,
sir.
well, so this time of year, mid-February right now, what's the typical lead time for your projects?
So that like the aforementioned permitting and regulation stuff aside, if we have it in stock in the yard, we can normally turn it in 2 weeks, maybe three. We're such a weather dependent industry. It's crazy how backed up you can get with a little weather. But if it was something that didn't need a permit, didn't need HOA, utilities got marked in a timely fashion, I would tell someone 2 to 3 weeks right now.
How's business compared to last season?
This weather has really, last year it felt like January was reserved or borderline slow, and February was a pretty good month for us. This year, between the snow, the cold, and the rain, we haven't been working near as much as we did last year. Lead count is, I don't know if it's comparable or maybe just slightly down to last year, but on the installation side, it's definitely not near as strong as last year was. Obviously, you get a couple, 2, 3 weeks of great weather that can change really quick in our industry, but I'd say we're probably going to see a little bit more of a delayed spring breakout than what we typically do, at the end of February, maybe instead of the middle of February.
With all those crews and all those jobs that you guys are putting in, how are you staying organized? Are you guys using any kind of the fencing software that's out there? What kind of technology are you guys using with your business on the back end?
We do use some different softwares. We have a gentleman that works for us that does a lot of our pricing, our selling tool and stuff, does a lot of the coding in-house. That's helped a ton. We have a really awesome admin staff. We're pretty strict on how things process, and there's a certain way it's processed, and that keeps it pretty streamlined. From when I started 8 years ago, and then when I started doing this part, 4.5 years ago, you almost wouldn't recognize the processes. So I do think it's continually getting better, but there's always room for improvement. And I've seen some of the newer scheduling softwares and some of the AI stuff that's been coming out. I don't know when or if we would ever adopt that, but I'd be curious to know if, especially if other people have used it, where that kind of lies in as far as how much of an improvement on efficiency they were seeing. Like, was it a 50% improvement? Because some of those numbers, you just kind of are mind blown at how quick people are able to turn some of their customer contacts, their follow-ups, their proposals and things using some of that AI generated stuff now.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see. We try to stay, and stay with the technology, never going to stay ahead of it.
Yes, sir.
Just constantly playing catch up. But the systems that we have in place, they do work for us, even if it's sometimes, still just pen and paper. Obviously, whenever, you deal with more and more, you can only handle so much as a person, obviously, until you've got to hire another person. So whenever it comes to hiring somebody to take some of those tasks, I mean, I really truly think AI is going to be the next employee for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's trending that way, and I just don't see how a person can be expected to compete day in and day out with something that's never sleeping, never eating, never on the phone. It's just consistent. I'd be curious to know what some of those other people, I've seen some real limited stuff, know what type of improvement they're seeing on their, just simple things like callbacks and scheduling. I'd just be curious to know what type of improvements they're seeing, what type of enhancement it is, because I do think it will eventually get to that point. I just don't know when that is for us.
Yeah, I'm still the guy, that's, still got his hands on everything. I don't think AI is going to replace the hole digger anytime soon. So that old school feel and touch of things and knowledge, I mean, we're still useful. We'll catch up to technology, maybe one day. We'll see. How do you guys typically market yourselves? Like, do you guys have a marketing department, or is it just kind of, what are you guys doing to kind of get yourselves out there?
So that's something we've recently expanded, and I'm not able to speak to that very well in depth. But there was a time there where like 90% of our business was organically generated.
That's a huge, you know, avenue in fencing,
Yeah. The referral customer, people seeing our signs, we've been here for over
everything.
4 decades. So the signs everywhere. It's just when I first started and I was told that, you almost just don't believe it because it just doesn't seem feasible in today's day and age. And then, the amount of referral work I get, like I said, I've been doing this for a little over 4 years. It's unreal what I'll get from that. And I think that says to two things. One, that's a fantastic brand to be able to have someone call you back after so long. But two, the referral work is one of the highest compliments I think you can get in our industry. It just that everything went so right that someone felt comfortable telling another person to please call this company because I had such a great experience with them. And I didn't really appreciate that type of business when I first started versus now. Like those are some of my favorite customers.
Oh yeah, yeah. We definitely find that good solid, verbal referral from a neighbor or a friend. I mean, it's worth way more than a Google review.
Yes, for sure.
100%, as soon as that review is given by that customer to their friend. So,
Yes, sir.
is still huge, for this type of business.
Yes, sir.
So, what would you say sets you guys apart in your area?
Well, that's a loaded question.
They all are. So,
That's a good question, actually. Having that mix of hourly and sub crews helps a ton. Jobs where we need to be productive that, one of our two-man crews would take a week to do, we're able to stay competitively priced. But really on those higher end jobs you referenced earlier, that kind of specialty niche customer that has a desire for a product that you can't just go buy, not an equivalent, but a comparable product off the shelf at your local big box store, your rails or whatever you're buying from your nursery or ag supply store, your wire from your Tractor Supplies, those type of products. Actually, one job that we did with your product down towards DC, they said, I can't remember if we were the ninth or they had talked to 9 companies before us trying to get that project put in. And, everyone else was a solid no for all the various reasons that, you can go into to list, but, ours was just a, yeah, we can do it. Let us take a look at it kind of approach. It just, to go through 10 people telling you it can't be done, and then you get to us and it was done. I think that's really what sets us apart, is being able to accommodate a customer like that.
yeah, that always goes miles. Whenever somebody, they get fed up with calling everybody, and then they finally find the guys that are like, we can do that.
Yeah.
That goes a long way. And again, back to the referrals, he'll definitely refer you.
Yes, sir.
Now, do you guys attend? Well, obviously, because we just sent you some materials for it. But tell me about the home and garden shows that you guys have attended or are attending this year.
So we really only do the local Frederick one. Some of the ones that would be in areas that we would maybe go to are, their return on their investment is kind of low or negative. But we've always tried to have a presence at the local one. That's kind of how I found out last year all the different fencing companies or companies that were offering fencing now sprung up. It's a 2-day event. It's held down at our local fairgrounds. It's a pretty good put together program, a lot of variety, and it gets really good traffic. So not all of those shows are created equal, and some of them are overrepresented versus what they actually are. But this one turns out pretty good, and we normally end up getting a few quality leads from it. If nothing else, just getting the name out there and interacting with people, getting a vibe for different things that they're looking for, just kind of getting a generalized idea of what maybe you're looking at going into the spring of anything that you didn't think of. Custom stuff, scheduling, lead times, the same question asked multiple times is a pretty good indicator that someone else is having the same issue that you are as far as supply or something going on, price point, whatever. So it's a good way to do some reconnaissance and maybe get a little bit of information that you normally wouldn't have had just talking to some people as they were walking around.
Yeah, I always find that those home shows are almost kind of like the Daytona 500 of bring your best of the best out first of the year. And if it does good, it really sets the tone for the rest of the year. We have one here in Oklahoma City. That's quite a big show. We try to attend that one every year, and we've always found great value in doing them. They go to those things. Like you said, your customer that you did one, the last fence for with our material. They had hardscapes that they were still working on. Those customers see those things. Whether they are there for it or not. And so they may not have even known, that they wanted this product, but since you were there and you had it, you made that connection with that customer. So, the more that you can put your products out there in front of people, the better. It's just like a showroom, that typically, those people wouldn't have ever seen anyway. So,
Yeah, that's kind of like where we felt with the Goliath product was, we had so much success with it over last year. There's no reason not to put it first and forefront this time. People see wood fences, they see the chain link, they see the everyday stuff. Let's start pushing some of this other product out there. And you don't want to put something out there you don't have good success with or good rapport with the company. And, this has been pretty much a home run on all the fronts so far. So there's no reason why we shouldn't get it out there and let people know the success that we've had with it. And, something simple like what you just have behind you there goes a long way. People just don't know it exists if they haven't, gone down that rabbit hole, like I said earlier. And if, you don't know what you don't know and you don't know what you're looking for until you find it. And a lot of the time, a little sample like that goes a long way. It doesn't have to be, several hundred feet or dozens of panels put together. It can just be something simple like that. So,
Very effective tools.
yes, sir.
Who would you say is your ideal customer?
That's another good question. I guess probably a repeat customer would be the ideal customer, for
Totally.
the same reasons before. I guess, outside of that realm, probably a higher end specialized project is where we could really provide not just the design and installation expertise, but the service expertise on that. That's normally where I feel we're head and shoulders above most people around here is on the service side. There are several companies we run across that don't do service work outside of their warranty period. We run full-time service and repairs for not just fences we installed, but all fences year round. That can get backlogged pretty quick, and that's not really the big dollar generator that you would like it to be. But it's something if you're going to talk about how good your service is, you have to be able to back it up with the actual service. And when you're getting a project installed that it's tens of thousands of dollars, something that should last for a lifetime, you want to be able to service it for the lifetime of that product. And if that's a lawnmower damage, a car sliding off the road, a tree falling on it, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to replace that product for that customer and they're just not high and dry after they spend all that money up front with you.
100%, man. Well said on that. We definitely try to keep, a large inventory of everything that we sell. Obviously the best selling products we have a lot of, and, if we're out of anything, we try to make sure it is not for long. So yes, exactly what you said, being able to service, your product further on down the road, whether it be, next month because a screw came out and, just a bracket was missing maybe, or, 10 years down the road and you've got to replace one picket because the lawnmower chucked a rock through it. You want to be able and so
Happens all the time.
being able to service that product that you put in, that always speaks volumes and, keeps it open for, repeat business down the road. Like you said, repeat customers, quite typically always the best one. Now, do you guys offer any sales, discounts, or specials during the year? I know kind of going into some of these home shows, like we'll kind of say, hey, if you can, sign a contract with us today or commit today, we may be able to take like an extra something off. So you guys ever do anything like that?
I don't. I don't know if any of the other salesmen do. There's not like a company sponsored program. I have a little referral program I put together myself. We're in a hotbed area of gimmicky sales promotions. Run into it a bunch of times, back when we used to do set downs in the kitchen with the customer. I've been on some large jobs where they had multiple salesmen out to price at the same time, almost like an auction bid. It's just kind of crazy what some of the promotions these customers would run, or these businesses will run for their customers. And it's not something that we ever felt like it just wasn't our brand. There has been some times where we've had some products that we wanted to move quicker, or we were trying to, get more work for the vinyl crews or something. We might be able to help you out on some pricing, but as far as a winter sale or a winter buy or something, we don't really have anything like that we can at least consistently offer.
Right. Yeah, and I hear that a lot throughout, most installation places. And again, for us in our installation side, it's not anything that we typically do either. As a supplier, we have a Black Friday sale every year. But like you said, we don't do the gimmicky things. We don't say, hey, if you buy today, we'll go ahead and, knock 5% off, other than like our home show. And that's because, hey, that customer is coming in from, maybe 3-4 hours away. And, we may not be able to make that connection again. So, if somebody's really in the market, and they're looking to, get started, hey, you're here, we appreciate you being here. Let's get something going today. And, we may knock something off there. But other than that, for us, it's pretty much, just our yearly sale.
Our company is really good about empowering the salesman to make those sort of things happen. But, at some point, a customer will see through fake and if you're not being genuine about it, if it's not something you genuinely want to regularly do, or you're not just you're offering it to try and get that quick close, or before you pull out of the driveway kind of thing, I think a lot of the time they see through it. And we do with vendors too. We'll get a random email from a vendor. I priced something forever ago. All of a sudden, it's they can offer it for 40% off
That's the
if it's
worst.
still an active project. And that just kills me when they do that. You know, most people I think in this industry would say their pricing is fair. And I agree with that too. It's just finding the value in that yourself. And that's something we try and empower all of our customers to do. And we do ourselves when we're shopping for the products and the vendors and things. Is the price point, does it offset, the benefits that you get for it? And if it does, it's a pretty easy decision to just go ahead and move with that product group or that division, because it's same thing on our end. It's real easy to see whenever you have some gimmicky fake stuff going on versus someone that's genuine about it.
What is the one tool on the trucks that you do not send your guys out without?
Tape measure.
Fair enough.
I honestly, that's
No, because you're not an installer, right?
no,
Did you
sir.
start out as an
Sales.
installation?
Yes. What's that?
Said, did you start out in installation?
No, sir. Other than a couple family fences I've installed since I've started here, the only thing I ever installed was some old barbed wire and some high tensile with my grandparents.
So you've been mostly sales and kind of, on
Yes,
the back.
sir. I would venture to say, and not to sound like a smart aleck, but I'd venture to say a lot of our installers would say that exact answer. One of them might say is pliers, but the rest of them especially on the hourly side guys, they're just genuinely great people. I can't tell you how many times I've gone out to a really complicated job. I've been stressed. I'm trying to placate the customer because we found a gas main running through the rear of their property that wasn't marked, or it's not in the spot they said it was. And the installer just calmly is like, man, I got it. They've been doing this for 25 years. You just put your trust in them and they can take care of it. And
Well, it sounds like you guys definitely have some solid crews there. Like you said,
you
a lot
you
of them
should
have
swing out by. You would very much enjoy meeting a few of these guys.
oh, man, no doubt. What is the best piece of fencing advice that you've received? Any type of fencing related advice?
So when I first started, our founder, Charlie, was still a little bit involved with the transition of passing the business off to his children. And I got to spend a little bit of time with him. And he just, he kind of explained what the business was about and, the legacy that he kind of built with it and passing it on. And he just told me about how the biggest key in the business was being honest and open, not trying to fabricate or twist stuff or do something underhanded or try and shortcut someone. And that honestly kind of carried with me because it is a lot easier to have those hard conversations from the get-go instead of just trying to pass them down the road. And I think that goes a long way with any aspect of our business, from the initial lead take to the service work to the hopefully the repeat work. If you're just open and honest the whole way through, I think you're going to be okay.
What's a good quote to live by?
I should have looked one of these up. Well digging is the only job you'll start at the top.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Has Frederick Fence ever been able to give back to the community through fencing in any way?
So we do a pretty decent amount of stuff with Boy Scouts. I know some of the guys have donated their time over the last, decades they've worked here to help some local people out. I think we were part of the Arlington Cemetery fence project at least once. And then, there's some various stuff that we do. We'll go out to look at a lead and it's something very simple like a latch repair or something for a recently widowed lady or whatever. We try and take care of them as best we can, but that's stuff that's on the management side and I'm not privy to a lot of the extra that we do. I just personal experience there.
Very cool. I mean, any little thing that you can do to help any person out in the industry is
Yeah,
that's
those little latch adjustments and stuff, it's almost not worth to try and even write up the proposal to send the guys out. You just, twist a couple screws or reset a latch here or there, or shim something here, and
in
it
those
typically
little
takes care of
instances,
it.
I'll always tell a customer, hey, if anything, please leave me a great review. I won't charge you a
Yeah.
dime, but hey, if you've got 30 seconds, please leave me a review. That'll go further than the $50 I might have charged.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's tough to, you know, you drive an hour from the office, it's really hard to justify the cost to people, what it costs to, send a guy out, the trip charge, the cost and wear and tear on the truck and that. So that review thing's probably something I need to get a little bit better about doing. It would go a long way, and I think that's something that would be really helpful for us to implement as well. Yeah.
Uh, Finally, Brody, at the end of the day, what does a salesman do to let off some steam?
Man, you've had a few good ones this time. So I like my dog. I have a 6-year-old German Shepherd. So that's probably been the biggest outlet for blowing off some steam. Shooting sports, hunting, that sort of stuff you can do in our off season is my main driver. I don't really take any time off from February-ish till, maybe middle to end of September, because that's our prime window and I don't want to miss that. So if it's a fall sport or a fall activity, I'm pretty down for it, but consistently probably the dog. My wife's probably not going to like that she wasn't mentioned in that, but
Listen to this
the
type of stuff, and it's man's best friend for
yes, sir. He's my buddy.
Brody. 1,000 thank yous for stopping by the podcast today, man, and sharing your industry expertise, knowledge, and some sales techniques.
Appreciate the opportunity. If we can ever do it again, I'm pretty excited for a couple of these new jobs from you to go in, and we got a couple quotes with your stuff out too. One of them's semi-large for a project for this type of product, and it's pretty excited to see where the rest of the year goes with it if we've already got those out this early in the year.
Well, man, we look forward to it. If there's anything we can do to help move that your way, please let us know. Customers in your area, that like our products and want to, to use you and your company to have them installed, or if there's anybody out there listening that's in your area, how can they reach you for your products and services?
So our website's been our main driver for traffic here lately. We've redone it a little bit. I think it's been doing pretty good, but we've had the same phone number since 1982, 301-663-4000. And you call that number, you can talk to a real life person and they'll be able to get you situated with whatever direction you need to go. DIY material, installation, service, just general fencing questions, whatever we can do. That's been the home run number for 43 years now.
Awesome. You guys have all the social media platforms or mostly just website?
So Facebook and Instagram for sure. That's part of the media we were talking about earlier about maybe expanding with. I'm not sure what we've expanded to or will be expanding to, but the big, the Facebook and Instagram and then our website for sure.
Very cool. Well, Brody, again, thank you so much, man. I truly appreciate you. Whenever you can get those pictures, man, I'd love to see them. And anytime you have any media, please feel free to share it. We'll get it, out there as much as we can. So that way, you can reshare the content. Man, I hope this podcast does some great, benefits for you.
I hope so. I hope there's a clip or two you can use. It's been a pleasure, but it's always nice when you can get that kind of relationship, podcast aside, relationship with your vendor.
Sure, man. And same goes with you. I love getting to know, my customers. Anytime you ever need anything, please feel free to reach out, text us. That's usually the easiest thing.
Yep.
Hey, man, I need 2 rails shipped ASAP. I can get that on it, and dude, we get that.
It helps a ton, it really does. You can pass that service on to your customer. I don't want to say it's rare, but it's harder to find those type of relationships with a lot of this product group, the specialty stuff, especially Oklahoma to Maryland isn't the easiest commute. So it's worked out good on our end, and anything we can do to help you, we appreciate all the help you offer us.
Brody, again, thank you so much, man.